This video is about pseudo-classes for links. Now that's a CSS thing, but this video is also about links in general. Not only their appearance, but how they work. So as a person who's new to HTML and CSS, you need to make sure that you have a full understanding of why links appear the way they do, because you can change that with CSS. So what we're looking at here is a demo page that has text at the top in a box that is not links, it's just colored text. And in the lower part, there's a paragraph that contains actual links that are marked up in the HTML with A tags, anchor elements. So let's look at the HTML. And after the heading, we have a div that contains a list. And I've taken the bullets off. And you can see that within that list, we've got 6 lines, and they are just LI elements. They don't have any links in them. They don't have any actual A elements. Whereas the paragraph below, the single paragraph, has a lot of A elements, most of which contain a fake URL, but it doesn't matter that that's not a real page. They will still act as links because they are A elements, okay? And they've got an href inside them that causes them to have a particular color and a particular appearance. So this appearance is determined by default by the browser that you're using, whether it's on a phone or a laptop or a desktop or whatever. So typically the links are blue and underlined, and when you roll over them, the cursor turns into a hand, or in some cases an arrow, but the color doesn't change, the appearance doesn't change by default. And when a link has been clicked already, it's a visited link. So by default, the links that have not been visited are blue and underlined. A link that has been visited is purple and underlined. And one thing you may have never noticed, a link, when you're holding down the mouse button on it, by default, it is red and underlined. And when I let go, we'll go to that Wikipedia page. So the browser defaults account for 3 states of a link. Either it's never been visited, it has been visited, or it is currently active, meaning the mouse button is pressed on it. And often you only see that red color for a split second as you click down and then let go. Using CSS, we can change these default colors, and there are actually more than 3 choices for us to make. So if I go into my style sheet for this page, I've got the link pseudo classes already filled in the proper order, but I have them commented out. So I'm going to remove the comment characters and resave my CSS. And the first thing I'd like you to pay attention to is the order of the 5 pseudo classes for links. The order is quite important, as Robbins points out in her book. If you change the order, they don't work correctly. The bottom one may override a higher one. The best example would be if you put the A link pseudo class at the end of this list of 5, the only color you would see would be that one. That would override the other 4 altogether. So the order, the correct order is link, visited, focus, hover, and active. We've talked about link and visited and active. We have not talked about focus and hover. That's coming up next. But let's see how this has affected our paragraph. All right, and I'm going to rearrange the windows. So the first thing you'll notice is that the links are no longer blue, they are a sort of a fuchsia or deep pink color. The next thing you should be able to notice is that when I roll the mouse over any link, the color changes slightly. It becomes a little brighter. And if you're not seeing the effect really clearly on the links that have not yet been visited, on this visited link, Wikipedia, you will see that. So when I hover, it changes. And that change is affected by the hover pseudo-class, right? So whatever you've put in there is going to affect hovering. Another thing that I might add to hover is I might say, take the underline off. So that is done with text decoration, that property, and none will remove the line. So if I save and over here I reload, doesn't look different yet, but now, because of that change, whenever I hover with my mouse, the underline goes away as well as the color changing. So hover can be used to produce effects. I could also make the background color different when I hover. Let's say I make it a dark gray. Reload. Okay, so that's a really big change. And one thing to note is that hovering only happens when you've got a mouse. When you're using your finger, when you're on a mobile device, on a tablet, there's no mouse, so you don't see this effect at all. I also altered the active color, and so when I press the mouse, you'll see that the background from hover is still in effect, but the text color is changing. Perhaps that would be more visible if I remove the background from hover. Reload. All right, so if I press with the mouse, it becomes a sort of a gray color. And I'll show you the palette that I'm using. I'm using these 5 colors. So they're not all the bright pink, but most of them are sort of this fuchsia tone. And the one pseudo-class we haven't talked about yet is the focus pseudo-class. So when does that come into effect? Another thing you may never have realized is that links are indicated in a certain way if we press the tab key. So if I press tab, will actually go through the links on the page. This is quite important, even though you may not have known that this exists. People who are using various kinds of assistive devices will be using the tab key, and when they choose the link that they want to go to, they press the return or enter key and then they go there. Notice that the box around the link text was not affected by what I wrote on focus. Okay, I gave it a color, and you know color only affects the text and the border. You may think this is a border. It's not a border. It's actually what's called the outline color. So if I want to change the color of the box, I don't do it with border, I do it with the CSS property outline color. And I may also want to take off the text decoration when I do that. So save and reload. All right, tab, 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 tab. Thing to keep in mind, if you change focus in any way, remember the reason it's there. It is there to visually show people which link they're currently on because they're not using a mouse. So they need to be able to see this. Visibility is the most important thing about the focus pseudo-class. and you must never, ever remove the outline color. The outline color is essential for people who need this method of navigation. The last thing we need to talk about is how are you going to ensure that the colors you choose for the link pseudo-classes are visible and have good contrast with the background color wherever they appear in your document. And that's why I've got this text up here. It's not links, but that will allow us to do some experimentation. So in my CSS document, what I've done is I've styled some classes. They're not pseudo-classes because these lines of text are not A elements. So I'm going to affect them by changing these classes. What I'm going to do is use a different palette that I've saved in order to talk about having good contrast for all 5 pseudo-classes when you apply the colors. So I've got some text already set up. When I save and I reload over here, you're going to see right away that some of the lines are really difficult to read, in particular this one, right? So whatever I put in the hover text, that is not a good choice if my background is going to be white. But your background isn't always going to be white, right? So you've got to test it. And another thing to think of is that on some parts of your page, perhaps your background is a different color from the rest of the page. And then you're going to have to change the colors in your pseudo classes so that your links are clearly visible in all their 5 states, no matter where your links appear on your page. So let me give you an example of that by changing the background color on this div. So I save and I reload, and now you see that possibly these are really good choices for the 5 pseudo classes if my background color is this darker shade, right? Now the normal text is no good. I would probably change that to white or something very, very light. Another thing to consider is whatever color the normal text is, you want the link color to stand out. So if the normal text were in fact a white color, this might not be the best color for your links because it might not really stand out. This might be a better standout color for the links that have not yet been clicked. So make sure that you're paying attention to the colors in all the pseudo classes and on all the sections of your page when you've got different background colors and you've got links in those differently colored sections. One last thing to show you is a super shortcut for links. If you're going to style all 5 pseudo classes differently, you have to name them all and you have to put them in this exact order as I've mentioned before. But what if you don't want to style anything differently other than the hover? The way to do that is to get rid of everything but hover. And instead of specifying link, because that would only affect link and you'd be stuck with the purple for visited and the red for active, instead take off the pseudo part and have only A. So what I'm showing you here is a shortcut if the only difference you ever want somebody to see in the text, the focus will still have the blue outline, that's the default. But the only change you want to make to text is when somebody hovers. I'm going to save this and reload this, and it looks the same, but notice Wikipedia is now exactly the same as all the others, even though it has been visited. And if I Click down on Wikipedia. Nothing changes except the underline is still gone because the hover state is still in effect. The focus effect is the same. We still have the blue outline. Keep this in mind if you really don't want to style 5 different colors for your links, particularly if you have a lot of sections of your page with differently colored backgrounds. So pay attention to the pseudo-classes for links, the order of the pseudo-classes, and the colors that you use for any link at any point on your page, because make sure that it is legible, that you've got good contrast between the link color, the regular text, and also the background color.